My guests today are Jose Padin, the U.S. Public Sector Senior Director of Sales Engineering at Zscaler, Ned Miller, the Vice President of Federal at CrowdStrike, and Sean Fraser, the Federal Chief Security Officer at Okta. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We are talking about zero trust today. It's a common topic. We know about the OMB memos. We know about the White House executive order. We know as well it's a journey. It's not just one product. It's not one thing you do. It's a whole new mindset. So let me start with that basic piece there. Agencies are moving down this path and they're going to hit some roadblocks, some obstacles along the way. Where do you see some of those struggles happening? Where do you see some of those challenges popping up? Maybe let me start with Sean, because identity seems to be that first piece that everyone goes to when we talk zero trust.
Yeah, identity is certainly the first pillar of zero trust, and it's not an accident that it's that way. And I think one of the biggest things that we see agencies who are successful, who have adopted kind of the mindset shift or the lifestyle change that zero trust brings. I think agencies that are challenged kind of look at it as kind of an unforced error or an unfunded mandate, where they look at OMB saying, oh, they're telling me to do these things and I'm not already doing these things, so now I got to figure out how to go pay for it. I think the agencies that have kind of reversed that and thought about this as just the taking advantage of a mandate to do what they're going to do anyway with cyber hygiene. I think those are the ones who really have moved out on this and been really successful.
And Sean, what's weird about this discussion that you and I have talked about many times is agencies have been on this identity management journey for so long. I mean, you and I go back to HSPD 12. Why is zero trust different around identity than what we've been looking at over the last 15 or so years?
Because it brings identity into a larger context. And zero trust is really all about kind of data security and data access. And identity plays a role in that, but it's not the only thing. And that's why we see the three companies represented here, that we work in a very strong partnership together, is because it really takes all of us. It takes a village to build out this model. And oh, by the way, it's not a project that's ever done. You're going to build this into your DNA and it's going to live with you forever. So it's a lifestyle choice.
Let me ask Jose and Ned also to weigh in on that struggle piece. You all are looking at it from different perspectives. CrowdStrike is around threat hunting, threat analysis, understanding the threat. Obviously, Zscaler is the network side. So maybe Jose, start off with the network side, because that relates back to identity, and then we can get into the CrowdStrike piece. Jose?
Yeah, and so when we talk about struggling and challenges and opportunities, what I would say is get started today. And Sean brought up a great point about using the mandate as fuel in order to get started. Often, what we see sometimes is this, kind of, I call it a spinal tap mindset, right? I'm the government, I need level 11 security. That's the only way I can do things, right? That's really not what this whole idea is about. It's about a change in strategy. It's about finding opportunities to get wins and do it in the near time without having massive changes, right? And that's what the strategy lines out. That's what the maturity model can line out. And that's where you could find opportunities to get wins starting right away. What's incredible is in 2209, it actually calls that out specifically. It says, start taking a FISMA moderate system, make it accessible and the internet following zero trust principles, and do that in the near term in order to build confidence in your agency. That's almost, kind of word by word what's said. I'm paraphrasing, but that is the concept that is put into the mandate. Start today, start now, find opportunities to get wins. Don't wait until you figure out how to get to level 11 on every single pillar, right? Find those wins and find them in the short term now.
You would agree, though, everybody is starting. I mean, when we talk to agencies, I mean, I hope you're not walking into an agency customer or potential customer and they're saying, yeah, that zero trust thing, that's a big goal for 2023 or 2024. I hope they've started, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say what's incredible is when I, had these same conversations in 2018, 2019, 2020, that was the conversation that you would see. What we see now is, for the majority, no, right? Like everyone is going down this path and realizes that we need to find a way to identify our users. We need to make sure that they have access to the applications that they need for at that point in time. We need to have great instrumentation to understand what's going on at the device level and share that throughout the ecosystem so that I can make threat decisions. And so the concept, absolutely, the concepts are there, and we're not going in and educating people about zero trust anymore. We're talking about finding wins and finding use cases to get return on investment in the short term.
All right, obviously good news that the folks are not the education piece. Maybe we're done with that first step. And now let's get into the other steps. Ned, from CrowdStrike's perspective, same type of question. Where are agencies maybe most challenged when it comes to taking that zero trust and maturing that model?
Sure, Jason. So again, from our lens, the EDR component of Zero Trust has been the most mature area that we've seen customers move out on over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. And across the federal civilian executive branch, a number of the agencies have already deployed EDR, and they're starting to derive the benefit of those. And as I mentioned earlier today, we're starting to get to the point where we can share some of that telemetry data to be able to do some advanced threat hunting. The areas that we've seen where there is some struggle is perhaps in areas of what we consider the definition of EDR. So example, if you start to look at other classifications of devices, whether it's mobile and or in this particular case, I'll cite cloud workload protection or cloud workloads. EDR for each one of those elements has been treated separate and distinct, meaning mobile and cloud have been separate security models, acquisition strategies, technologies, yet the same purpose or premise that the executive order set for thou shalt EDR, we believe that the next area needs to be around mobile and cloud in terms of their protection profiles, and not necessarily having to come up with unique funding sources to be able to do that. And that's an area where we've seen some resistance from customers where they are unsure how to work perhaps with CISA to secure additional funding to extend their EDR, I'll call it architecture, to include cloud and mobile. So therefore they're struggling with budgets. Do those elements fall under Zero Trust budgets, which now we're in a CR, so now they're looking for their FY23 funding to show up in order to execute against other reference architecture components that make up Zero Trust overall.
That's interesting, Ned, that they are kind of struggling with how to extend EDR to cloud and mobile. It seems logical, given the last 30 months or so around how we've all become mobile, right? We're all we've understood that the network, the end of the edge of the network is now wherever you're working for today, not the end of your building or as you walk out the building. Do you get a sense of why that's difficult, or is it just the next step in the process? So of course, change is hard. We've heard all these things before.
Exactly. I think that'll be the evolution of the definition of EDR. I think we'll see additional guidance come from OMB, perhaps even some congressional support will start to influence the expansion of the definition of what falls under the categories of EDR. But at the moment, that is certainly a gate that we're starting to see in terms of some of the hurdles the agencies are facing.
The thing that I think has come up several times during our conversation is, how do you apply Zero Trust? And I think Ned brings up mobile and cloud as examples of the next place for maybe EDR. Jose, let me come back to you around the trends and use cases. Are there a couple good trends and use cases you're starting to see about where Zero Trust architecture can really start having that immediate impact, so you can then build on it to continue down that journey?
Yeah, there's two trends that we're seeing right now that are really interesting. The first is, as the first step of Zero Trust, need to understand the identity, need to understand the device, get access to applications. The trend that we're seeing is that we used to ask about what applications users are having access to. Really, there's not a good idea. There's not an inventory we don't understand, right? So we lend that to the government agency. They can now see what users are getting access to. And what's been incredible is around that, we're getting scores around user experience. We're getting scores around the security aspect of that endpoint, of whether or not they should get access. So that user experience change and actually getting into what it's like for a user to get access and interact with our systems, that trend is growing and has really helped the government. We're seeing just a lot of momentum, a lot of conversations around that. And it's kind of an unexpected response to going to Zero Trust, where you get this better visibility into a user's end user experience and can improve it, where you have people, kind of just giving actually great feedback to IT and saying, thank you, right? Now I can actually see what's going on. I could get better user experience. I could get troubleshooting quicker. I don't have to try to capture something at a point in time. I can actually create user experience. I would add there's one other trend, and this is, kind of a really interesting trend too. And this is a, great partnership First, definitely partnership with CrowdStrike, Zscaler, and Okta. The second is really interesting from a citizen access perspective, right? There is ton of data, and the government is in the business of sharing data with its constituency, right? That is often a fundamental aspect of the agency, is to be able to share the service and share data with the constituencies. Well, the way that we do that today is prone for exploit. There's a lot that comes in, and often this is an exploit vector that people get into networks and move laterally, right? So the trend of finding a way to create zero trust mechanisms of access to take things off the internet so they're not breachable, but still share the information with the constituency, that's a trend that we're seeing grow as well over the last few months, few quarters. We've had tons of conversations around that. Zscaler and Okta specifically have an integration point to be able to allow a social log on, get at understanding of what that user is, give them access to data. It could be public, right? But we still want to protect that data and protect the infrastructure behind it. So those two trends are ones that we see growing over the last few months, and we're getting into a ton of conversations around.
Sean, I'll ask you a very similar question, because I know that when we talk about identity and access management, there's been a lot of push towards moving it out. We heard recently from folks at USCIS about some efforts they're doing to make the accessibility easier no matter where you're coming in from. Is that a trend you're seeing, that agencies want to make that application and data accessibility secure but easy no matter where they're at?
Yeah, and I think that's the natural inevitability of this. To Ned's point about everything kind of changing with regards to endpoint. I mean, we've been on a journey to be all mobile, all cloud for 10 years. And this is kind of the natural inevitability crossover point between our security model for that and our access model for that. We're all connected up to the public internet. Every organization is connected to the public internet. We're all on the same bad network. And oh, by the way, as Jose points out, we've got to deliver services to citizens. So now we got to connect to people who are on the big bad internet, both in the US and abroad, because there are citizens that live outside of the US, and we have to provide them comparable access to things. And we need to be able to do that securely and performantly, and great user experiences, right? Because again, the user experiences that they're used to when they log into their bank, or when they log into a Target to go get a delivery, we need those same user experiences brought to bear when we give citizen services and access to government data. And it's an important point that Jose makes, is that the government is in the business of data. We're not in the business of technology, really, right? It's not a technology problem. It's an access problem. And to the extent that we can focus and spend our money on providing great citizen services, great employee constituency services, that's where the money should be spent. It really shouldn't be on building technology stacks. That's why we all exist. That's why Jose and Ned and me, that's why our companies partner so well together, is because we're there to provide the solution to deliver that great service.
And of course, Ned, that great service that Sean was just talking about is relying on the data, understanding what data you have, what data is coming in. We heard again just recently about 75 terabytes of log data a day coming in, or something like that. What are the trends you're seeing around that data, and understanding what data you have, where those bumps in the normal are, and how to address them through advanced technology or the like?
Yeah, we've seen over the course of the last 2 years or so, the government acknowledging data is become what we're now labeling as a critical asset, right? So we tend to focus on physical items and devices, right, as critical. Now we're starting to see CDO titles across the board. They started off with just a few agencies. Now there's a chief data officer across almost all of them. And for the most part, and even in a previous panel that we just came off of, we have CISOs talking about going back and reassessing how to do data categorization and labeling for purposes of data loss prevention and understanding the value of that data. So we're starting to see, from my perspective, the customer mature to the point where they've recognized data is one of their more critical, high value assets. And as a result, they are starting to explore again the concepts around data loss protection, et cetera. And I think you'll see industry innovate in this area quite a bit. So the two kind of trend lines that we're seeing As it relates to customers coming back and asking us for assistance, as we've kind of over communicated here already, identity continues to be that one area of concern, and data is the second area. And I'd say they rate pretty consistently as the top 1 and 2 items of concern at the CISO level, depending upon who you're speaking with. So as we go forward, I think we'll continue to see more focus and innovation around identity protection and new models on how to do data protection.
And Ned, you keep setting me up perfectly for the next question, so appreciate that. So I'll come back to you. You said new models around identity protection, around data protection, and that's part of what it will take for a successful zero trust rollout as well. Can you talk a little bit about, from your perspective, as you talk to agencies, how are you telling them to position themselves in many ways to continue that to continue to mature around this journey? What's it going to take for them to kind of go down that path?
It certainly is a maturity model, Jason, that as many of the panel today here and my peers from the other technology partners are on this panel today, I think you would get consensus across the board that each customer that we deal with is at a different state of their adopting, whether we want to call it a zero trust reference architecture or zero trust journey, as we've talked about it. And each one of them, depending upon their mission, will prioritize, the data elements going forward, depending upon how that data is used, whether it's service to citizen, whether it's mission support, whatever it may be. So the interesting part is there's no one size fits all to the question, to be quite honest. It really is unique to almost every agency because their missions are, for the most part, unique depending upon what their service to citizen may be or in support of the mission. I do believe that from the perspective of a CISO, they are going to continue to evolve and want to be able to ask their enterprise risk-based questions and get near real-time responses back. And that's going to pivot, from my perspective, from history, we learned that we were vulnerability focused for a long time, and then we were compliance focused for a long time, and now we've shifted to risk-based focus. I think going forward now, we want to be much more proactive, and the partners that we have here today with Okta and our friends at Zscaler, we start to provide enough of the infrastructure and the telemetry data to allow the customers to be a lot more proactive in asking their enterprise, am I secure from this particular adversarial threat? So I think that the telemetry data that the vendors that are represented here today, the output from that telemetry data will get our end user customers much more advanced as they continue to adopt our capabilities and fully integrate across the board. That's my final observation for you, is that we still need to see customers take advantage of all the capabilities of the interoperability that we've created as a partnership here today. Jason, I'll back over to you.
Jose, Sean, as we kind of wrap up here, let me ask each of you, what's to you the sign that zero trust is more than just the buzzword we've been talking about the last few years? It's more than just a memo that OMB signed and now agencies are, okay, I'll do it. What will tell you that this is actually working? Maybe Jose, lead us off.
Yeah, I think what will tell us we're working is when we stop talking about it, right? So we once had debates of whether we would adopt a LAN. We once had debates of whether we would go to cloud and use cloud services. We once had debates around all different technology trends. I think at this point in time, the debate is over. The strategies around zero trust are strong. We know that we have been compromised multiple times in building a perimeter-based security model. So we need to look at something different. And that's really what zero trust is about. So when we have success is when it becomes a standard within the government to build by removing attack surfaces, by creating outbound only connections that don't allow lateral movement, by understanding what the user is, what they're accessing from an application and data perspective, and creating dynamic access to those by default, right? These are, if everyone on this call decided to work for a government agency that started from scratch tomorrow, right? We wouldn't go buy a whole bunch of iron, put it in data center, build security perimeter around it. We would never do that, right? So we would look at strategies and design principles today to build a network that's resilient and secure following these modern strategies. So really, when we stop having calls like this, that's when we know that we're successful, because we'll see the adoption as a standard within the government.
But Jose,
Yeah,
what are we going to talk about then if we don't talk about zero trust? We'll talk about the next thing, right?
We'll still be talking about AI, because
AI,
I
okay.
don't know if it really exists yet.
Well,
but,
we'll still be talking about cybersecurity, because cybersecurity never sleeps, right? This is
Right.
something, and again, kind of thinking about this holistically, and the reason why we're sitting here today talking about, we have been for the last couple of years, is because we've finally come to the realization that we're on the same network as the bad guys, right? And the bad guys has just as much access to the things that are important to us as we do, and it's up to us to prevent them from doing that. So, one of the most important things about this is making sure you've got the right protections, for your identity and access management solution. There's no argument that is critical infrastructure. If a bad guy can get through your ICAM solution, they can pretty much get access to other things. And to Ned and Jose's point about information sharing, one of the things that can be very helpful is context awareness and context sharing and threat sharing that can be happen at the time of need when someone tries to log into something. Because by the way, nothing happens till someone tries to request access to data. And that's when we need to be able to stand these things up, and we need to be able to do it continuously. So every single time we assess the trustability of that request using the context we have on hand, and we can't trust that that's going to be the same context 15 minutes from now or an hour from now.
All right. Ned, I'll give you the last word as well. Anything you just want to take us home with, a big takeaways from our discussion today?
Yeah, guidance to customers would be level set expectations around zero trust, leverage the subject matter experts that you have at your disposal. The vendors here today, whether it's Okta or Zscaler or CrowdStrike, we're more than happy to help you sit down and focus on where to start and get focused on the outcome. I can't stress enough that the majority of our conversations are all consultative, and we help customers focus on the desired outcome to get to those security metrics that matter, to get them on the right path for zero trust.
All right, gentlemen, I very much appreciated our conversation today. I've learned a lot, but unfortunately we're out of time. So let me thank my guests. Jose Padin is the U.S. Public Sector Senior Director of Sales Engineering at Zscaler. Ned Miller is the Vice President of Federal at CrowdStrike, and Sean Fraser is the Federal Chief Security Officer at Okta. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Jason.
the time. Thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Carahsoft.